Hello, and welcome back to the Loco Files. In today's episode, we'll be looking at the LMS Stanier 8F. The London, Midland and Scottish Railways Class 8F is a class of steam locomotive designed for hauling heavy freight. 852 members of the class were built between 1935 and 1946, as a freight version of William Stanier's successful Black 5. The class saw extensive service overseas during and after the Second World War. The class survived until the end of steam in August 1968, with 14 members of the class preserved in the UK and a few more preserved over and underseas. LMS freight traction suffered from the adoption of the Midland Railway's small engine policy, which had left it with trains double-headed by underpowered 060s, supplemented by disappointing Garretts and Fowler 7F 080s. The 8F design incorporated the two-cylinder arrangement of the Black 5s. They were initially classified as 7F, but this was later changed to the more familiar 8F. On the outbreak of the Second World War, the design was chosen to become the country's standard freight design, seizing the role from the Great Central Railway 8K class. The War Department had 208 8Fs built by Bayer Peacock and North British Locomotive Company, and requisitioned 51 more from the LMS. Stanier 8F production for the War Department continued until 1943, when the cheaper WD Austerity 280 was introduced. Production for British domestic use continued until 1946. Their construction was spread across several companies and a global war. The LMS constructed a total of 331 members of the class, being spread across Crewe, Horwich, North British and Vulcan Foundry. Crewe and Horwich built the bulk of the class with 212 examples between them, with Vulcan producing 69 members of the class and North British producing another 50. The War Department, as I mentioned earlier, built another 208 members of the class, as well as requisitioning another 51 members from the general population for duties overseas. For the construction, they chose North British and Bayer Peacock, with the latter building 50 members of the class and North British 157. The Railway Executive Committee, which was basically the ROD that operated the country's railways during both World Wars, built another 245 members of the class from all over the country, with Swindon producing 80 members, the LNER building 60 members between Darlington and Doncaster, and the Southern building 105 members of the class between Ashford, Eastleigh and Brighton Works. The LNER then ordered 68 members of the class to be built and classified them as the 06 class. These locomotives came from Eastleigh, Darlington and Doncaster, with Eastleigh building 25 members of the class, Darlington building 23 and Doncaster building 20. With their intended role in France having ceased to exist, early built WD-8Fs were loaned to British railway companies in 1940 and 1942, being given temporary numbers in the LMS series. However, by late 1941, need for locomotives in Iran and Egypt was such that all of the WD locomotives which had been completed up to that point were recalled for military service, and 50 more locomotives were requisitioned from the LMS. Locomotive WD number 407 had been damaged in an accident whilst on loan to the Great Western Railway, so another LMS engine was requisitioned as its replacement. By 1942, the need for locomotives overseas had been satisfied, and the final 24 brand new WD-8Fs remained in the UK on loan to the LMS. Also remaining in the UK were 9 damaged locomotives, including WD number 407 and 8 requisitioned locomotives, whose voyage to Iran had been aborted after the SS Pentridge Hill suffered severe storm damage. 4 other locomotives had to be jettisoned into the sea in order to save the ship. 2 locomotives were sold to Turkey in 1944, and the other 31 were sold to the LMS in 1943. In 1952, 5 War Department 8Fs returned to the UK from the MAF in poor condition. These were refurbished for War Department use at the Longmoor Military Railway. 3 of these were sold to British Railways in 1957, becoming numbers 48773, 48774 and 48775. The other 2 were transferred to the Cairn Ryan Military Railway and were scrapped in 1959, ending the War Department's use of the 8F locomotive. Out of the 852 that were built, a total of 624 passed into British Railways ownership when Britain's railways were nationalised in 1948. A further 39 locomotives, 10 of which were originally requisitioned, were bought from the MAF stock in 1948, and a final 3, with 1 being requisitioned from the Longmoor Military Railway, in 1957, bringing the total to 666. The 8Fs were concentrated on the London Midland region, but were also allocated to former LMS sheds in other regions. Despite some having operated in Scotland by the LMS, they were not a common sight on the Scottish region under BR ownership, as their War Department counterpart 280 and the War Department 210s were used in preference. We'll now look at the accidents and incidents involving members of the class. On January 21st, 1941, locomotive number 8247 of the London Midland and Scottish Railway was derailed at Woolnook Junction, Paisley, Renfrewshire. 3 cranes were needed to recover it. On July 2nd, 1941, locomotive number WD-407 was hauling a freight train which was involved in a head-on collision with an express passenger service at Slough in Berkshire. 5 people were killed and 21 were injured. Now, despite suffering a buckled frame, fractured pony truck, and a crushed cab, the locomotive, which was on loan to the Great Western at the time, was repaired by Swindon and then returned to the LMS in October of that year. On May the 8th, 1954, locomotive number 48462 of British Railways was hauling a freight train that became divided and derailed at Plumpton in Cumberland. On February 9th, 1957, locomotive number 48188 was hauling a freight train that ran away due to the failure of the steam brake pipe in the cab. It collided with a preceding freight train and a diesel multiple unit at Chapel-on-Leffe station in Derbyshire. Staff there had enough warning to be able to evacuate the passenger train before the collision. Driver John Axon had remained with the runaway freight and was killed, as was guard Creamer of the preceding freight train. Axon was awarded a posthumous George Cross. In 1959, locomotive number 48193 ran into the turntable pit at Kirkby in Ashfield, Nottinghamshire. On June 17th, 1960, locomotive number 48616 collided with some empty coaches and eventually derailed and rolled down the embankment. Nobody was hurt, and the locomotive was withdrawn and scrapped a few days later. On November 12th, 1961, locomotive number 48674 was derailed by catch points between Four Oaks and Sutton Coldfield. On December 16th, 1962, locomotive number 48263 was derailed by trap points at Spon End in Warwickshire. On August 14th, 1964, locomotive number 48734 collided with a train of oil tankers at Didcot in Oxfordshire. 11 tankers were derailed and subsequently caught fire, severely damaging the locomotive. It was declared a write-off and was scrapped at Crewe Works in November 1964. The 8Fs were successful and durable locomotives in BR service, with all 666 locomotives surviving until 1960, and routine withdrawals not beginning until 1964. The first to go in 1960 was 48616, followed 2 years later by 48009, 48773, 48774 and 48775, the former Longmore military locomotives, were also withdrawn in 1962, but these were reinstated by the London Midland region in 1963. The remaining 664 were withdrawn between 1964 and 1968, with 150 surviving to the last year of steam on BR. 14 8Fs are known to have survived into preservation, with 6 LMS/BR locomotives being preserved in the UK. A 7th locomotive was used as a spare donor for other preserved 8Fs, as well as a number of new build projects. Sadly, none of the pre-war 8Fs have survived into preservation. Of the 6 LMS/BR locos that exist, only 48773 was purchased directly from BR for preservation following her withdrawal at Rose Grove in July 1968. The remaining 5, including 48518, which would later be used as the donor engine, were all rescued from Barry Scrapyard. 3 members of the class have, over the years, been repatriated to the UK from Turkey, with 1 later being sent to a museum in Israel. 2 of the Turkish-based 8Fs which were repatriated to the UK, numbers 45166 and 45170, made an appearance on the Channel 5 TV programme Monster Moves. This episode showed the 2 engines being moved 850 miles by rail across Turkey, from Sivas to Izmir. 45166 would later end up in Israel as a static exhibit, while 45170 is presently under restoration at the Bowness Railway. In addition, 2 Turkish railway locomotives have also been preserved in Turkey, and some more remain there in a derelict state. 1 locomotive has even survived in Iraq. 2 more are visible underwater on the wreck of the SS Visselgorn. So, of the 14 engines known to have survived into preservation, all the British-based ones, except for 48173 and 45170, Sir William McAlpine, have run in preservation, but both are reportedly undergoing restoration. 2 of the British-based engines have also seen mainline duties, those being numbers 48151 and 48773. These have been regular mainline performers in the past, with 48773 being withdrawn from operation in 2000. As of 2022, none of the class is operable on the main line. Some of the preserved examples have stars on their cabs, which indicates that they have specially balanced wheel sets and motion. This practice began under British Railways to denote that the locomotives that had this star were able to be used on fast vacuum-braked goods services. Other members of the class have a yellow stripe on the cab, meaning that they were not permitted to run south of Crewe, as the West Coast Main Line south of Crewe had been electrified with overhead wires, and they would not fit in the loading gauge anymore. Another difference between the British engines and the locos that were exported is the position of the driving controls. The British-based engines, like all LMS engines, are left-hand drive, whereas the locomotives exported to Turkey and other countries are right-hand drive. I'd like to thank you all for watching and for listening. I hope you've enjoyed it. If you did, feel free to like, comment and subscribe. Let me know, out of the preserved 8Fs, which one is your favourite. Thank you, and goodbye.